What if I told you the Bible contains a chapter so disturbing? Most people never hear it preached ever, not because it isn't scripture, but because it exposes what happens when a society loses its soul. This is Judges 19, the concubine of Gibeah, and it may be the darkest chapter in the Bible. Before we begin, this is a heavy story. I'll tell it respectfully, no graphic details, but you need to understand why it's in the Bible. Judges is not a book of heroes, it's a warning. A record of what happens when faith becomes tradition and justice becomes optional. Judges repeats one line like a siren. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That sentence is the key to everything you're about to hear. The story begins with a Levite, a man from a tribe set apart for spiritual service, not a random traveler. Someone who should represent holiness, responsibility, and leadership. He has a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, and one day, she leaves him and goes back to her father's house. The text doesn't stop to explain every reason. And that S part of the discomfort, the Bible doesn't try to soften the reality of broken relationships. It just shows you the world as it was. After some time, the Levite decides to go after her. He travels to Bethlehem and speaks kindly to her, and her father welcomes him in. And suddenly the tone shifts. There's food, hospitality, conversation, celebration. The father keeps insisting, stay one more day, and the Levite stays, day after day. It feels almost normal, like the story might end peacefully. But the delays matter, because the longer they wait, the later they leave, and the later they leave, the darker the road becomes. Finally, they leave late in the day. The Levite, the concubine, and a servant. Night is approaching, and they need shelter. They pass near Gibeah, Jerusalem, and the servant suggests stopping there, but the Levite refuses. He says, in effect, no, that city isn't Israelite. He believes he'll be safer among his own people, so they push forward to Gibeah, a town of the tribe of Benjamin, and that choice, that confidence, becomes the trap. They arrive in Gibeah and sit in the town square. In that world, if you saw travelers at night, you offered shelter. That wasn't just kindness, it was duty. But no one invites them in. Imagine the silence of that moment. A Levite, a woman, a servant, alone, at night, in a town that should have known better. And that's the first sign. When a community loses compassion, evil doesn't need to kick down the door. It just waits for the moment nobody cares. Eventually, an old man comes from the fields. He's not originally from Gibeah, but he's living there. He sees them and asks why they're outside. The Levite explains, we have food, we have supplies, we just need a place to sleep. The old man insists, peace to you. Only don't spend the night in the square. He brings them home. They eat, they drink, they wash their feet. For a brief moment, it feels like safety has returned. But in this chapter, peace never lasts long. Then the night turns. Men from the city gather outside the house. They surround it. They pound on the door. They demand to harm the guest. This is the point where the chapter becomes infamous, and I'm going to handle it respectfully. The old man pleads. He tries to stop the violence. A terrible, shameful negotiation happens at the door, and the story makes you watch something you don't want to watch. How quickly people will sacrifice the vulnerable to protect themselves. I won't describe anything graphic, but what follows is evil and tragic, and the text makes it clear. This was a collapse of humanity. Morning comes. The Levite opens the door, and what he finds ends the illusion that this was just one bad night. The scene is written with a kind of brutal quiet, as if scripture refuses to add drama, because the reality is already heavy enough. And here's what's haunting. The chapter isn't only condemning the attackers, it's exposing the failure of everyone around them. The leadership, the town, the men inside the house, and the Levite himself. Then the Levite does something that shocks Israel. Not because it's sensational, but because it's meant to be a signal flare. He sends a message to the tribes, a message so extreme that it forces everyone to pay attention, and it works. The entire nation is horrified. They gather, they say, nothing like this has ever happened. Tell us what to do, because they understand something important. If this evil is ignored, it becomes normal. And if it becomes normal, Israel is finished. The tribes demand that Benjamin hand over the guilty men of Gibeah. The logic is simple. Remove the evil, stop it from spreading, restore justice. But Benjamin refuses. And this is where the story expands beyond one town. Because now it's not just about what happened in the night. It's about a tribe protecting its own, even when its own is guilty. The Bible is showing you a pattern. When identity becomes more important than truth, people will defend the indefensible. So why do almost no churches talk about Judges 19? Because it doesn't give you a comfortable villain and a comfortable hero. It gives you a world where nearly everyone fails. It exposes the collapse of hospitality, the collapse of leadership, the collapse of courage, and the cost paid by the vulnerable. And it forces you to ask, how did God's people get this broken? That's why the book keeps repeating. There was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. That line isn't just history, it's a diagnosis. And if you think this chapter is the worst part, what comes next is a civil war that nearly wipes out an entire tribe. Israel mobilizes, Benjamin mobilizes. Brother against brother. And the fallout is so catastrophic it reshapes the nation. So Judges 19 is not just a dark story, it's the spark that ignites a national collapse. Judges 19 asks a brutal question. What happens when society loses moral gravity? When people stop protecting the weak? When communities see suffering and keep walking? When leaders delay until it's too late? When my side matters more than justice? The darkest chapters in the Bible aren't there to glorify evil. They're there to show you what evil looks like when nobody stops it. So let me ask you, why do you think this chapter is ignored? Because it is too dark? Or because it's too revealing? Comment. Judges 19. If you want part 2, the civil war that follows this nightmare. And if you want more forgotten Bible stories, the ones people avoid but Scripture never hides, subscribe.